Ethan Carter was not your average man. By the age of 35, he had built an empire that most people could only dream of. Starting with nothing but determination and a few clever ideas, he turned his small tech startup into a global powerhouse. Money flowed into his bank accounts like rivers, and luxury surrounded him at every turn. But despite all his success, Ethan felt empty. His mansion was grand, his cars were fast, and his schedule was packed. Yet there was one thing missing from his life: companionship. Ethan wasn't someone who enjoyed socializing much. He spent long hours in boardrooms, negotiating deals, or locked away in his office, working on strategies to grow his business. Over time, friendships faded and romantic relationships became almost non-existent. Women were drawn to his wealth, but Ethan saw through their intentions. He didn't trust easily, and love seemed like a distant concept reserved for movies and fairy tales. His parents, however, refused to let him live this way forever. They came from a traditional background where family values were sacred, and they worried about Ethan growing old alone. "You need a wife," his mother said firmly during one of their rare family dinners. "Someone to take care of you, to build a home with." Ethan rolled his eyes at first, brushing off the idea as old-fashioned nonsense. But after months of persistent nagging, he finally gave in. Not because he wanted to marry, but because he figured it might make his parents happy. The arrangement was simple. Ethan's parents would find him a suitable bride, someone from a respectable family who shared their values. It wouldn't be a love match, but rather a practical partnership. Ethan agreed without hesitation. Love wasn't something he cared about anyway. He just needed someone dependable, someone who could handle a household while he focused on his work. If she happened to be intelligent enough to hold a decent conversation once in a while, that would be a bonus. When the families exchanged photos and details about the potential bride, Ethan barely paid attention. He skimmed through the information briefly before tossing it aside. The woman's name was Evelyn Harper, and she lived in a quiet little town far away. Her hobbies included reading and volunteering at local charities, which sounded harmless enough. But when Ethan glanced at her photo, his heart sank slightly. The image was blurry, heavily pixelated, as if someone had intentionally tried to hide her face. At first, Ethan shrugged it off. Maybe her family didn't have access to good cameras, he thought. Or perhaps they were simply old-fashioned and didn't prioritize such things. But deep down, a part of him suspected the truth. Their haste to arrange the marriage and the poor quality photo hinted that Evelyn might not be what society considered beautiful. Ethan sighed, telling himself it didn't matter. Beauty was fleeting, and he wasn't looking for perfection. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into something purely transactional, a marriage based on duty rather than desire. As the wedding date approached, Ethan prepared himself mentally. He reminded himself repeatedly that appearances weren't important. What mattered was stability, loyalty, and the ability to coexist peacefully. Yet, no matter how hard he tried to convince himself, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered doubts. Would he regret this decision? Was he settling for less than he deserved? These questions lingered as he stood at the altar, waiting for the mysterious woman who would soon become his wife. Little did he know, his assumptions were about to be shattered in the most unexpected way. Evelyn Harper was a mystery wrapped in simplicity. The little information Ethan had about her painted the picture of a quiet, unassuming woman who lived a modest life in a small town. Her family owned a small bookstore that had been passed down through generations, and Evelyn spent most of her days helping customers find their next favorite novel or organizing community reading events. She wasn't flashy or extravagant. Her life revolved around books, kindness, and service to others. From what Ethan's parents told him, Evelyn's family was well respected in their community. They weren't wealthy by any means, but they were known for their integrity and generosity. When the Carters approached them with the idea of an arranged marriage, Evelyn's parents hesitated at first. They loved their daughter deeply and wanted nothing more than her happiness. But after several discussions, they agreed, believing that marrying into the Carter family would provide Evelyn with opportunities she might not have otherwise. The one thing that stood out to Ethan during these conversations was how vague everyone seemed when describing Evelyn herself. Her hobbies were mentioned: reading, teaching Sunday school, volunteering at the local shelter, but no one spoke directly about her personality or appearance. It was almost as if they were deliberately avoiding the topic altogether. Whenever Ethan asked specific questions, like what is she passionate about, or how does she spend her free time, the answers were always broad and non-committal. This left him feeling uneasy, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. Then there was the photo, or rather, the lack of one. The grainy, pixelated image sent by Evelyn's family did little to ease Ethan's growing curiosity. He tried convincing himself that it didn't matter. After all, he hadn't agreed to this marriage based on looks. Still, the secrecy surrounding her appearance gnawed at him. Why wouldn't they send a clear picture? Was there something they were trying to hide? The more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that Evelyn must be, well, plain. Perhaps even unattractive. Maybe that was why her family was so eager to finalize the arrangement quickly. Despite his suspicions, Ethan tried to focus on the positives. If Evelyn truly was the kind, hard-working woman her family claimed, then maybe this marriage wouldn't be so bad after all. At least she wouldn't demand constant attention or expect him to shower her with expensive gifts. And if she preferred staying out of the spotlight, that suited Ethan just fine. He wasn't looking for a glamorous socialite to parade around at parties. All he needed was someone steady and reliable, someone who could manage the household while he focused on his empire. As the wedding preparations moved forward, Ethan caught glimpses of letters exchanged between their families. Evelyn's handwriting was neat and careful, each word chosen with precision. She wrote about her excitement to meet him, her hopes for their future together, and her gratitude for the opportunity to join his family. There was sincerity in every sentence, a warmth that made Ethan pause. For a moment, he wondered if perhaps he'd misjudged her, or if he was letting his own biases cloud his judgment. Could someone with such thoughtful words really be as ordinary as he imagined? Still, doubt lingered in the corners of his mind. Every unanswered question about Evelyn only deepened the mystery surrounding her. Who was this woman whose voice came alive in letters, but remained hidden behind blurred images? What secrets did her family guard so fiercely? As the big day drew closer, Ethan found himself oscillating between curiosity and apprehension. Would she live up to his expectations, or shatter them completely? Only time would tell. And until then, all he could do was wait. The day of the wedding arrived, and Ethan felt a strange mix of nerves and resignation. He had spent weeks preparing himself mentally for this moment, reminding himself over and over again that appearances didn't matter. What mattered was building a stable life with someone who could share the responsibilities of marriage. Still, as he stood at the altar in his perfectly tailored suit, his heart raced with anticipation. The weight of the decision he was about to make pressed down on him like an invisible force. The ceremony took place in a grand hall adorned with flowers and soft lighting. Guests filled the room, chatting quietly among themselves as they waited for the bride to make her entrance. Ethan barely noticed them. His eyes were fixed on the large wooden doors at the back of the hall, his mind racing with questions. What would she look like? Would she seem nervous too? Could they find common ground despite the circumstances that brought them together? Finally, the music began, a gentle melody that signaled Evelyn's arrival. The doors creaked open slowly, and everyone turned to watch as she stepped inside. Ethan held his breath, bracing himself for what he assumed would be a modest, unremarkable woman walking toward him. But the moment Evelyn appeared, everything changed. She walked gracefully down the aisle, her movements steady yet elegant. Her gown was simple but stunning, flowing softly around her, as if it were made just for her. Her hair was styled in loose waves, framing a face so radiant it seemed to glow under the chandeliers. And her eyes, those deep, expressive eyes, met Ethan's with a warmth that sent a jolt through his chest. For a split second, he forgot how to breathe. Ethan's jaw dropped slightly, and he had to resist the urge to blink repeatedly to ensure he wasn't dreaming. This couldn't possibly be the same woman from the pixelated photo. Evelyn was breathtakingly beautiful, her presence commanding attention without being overbearing. She carried herself with quiet confidence, exuding grace and poise that left everyone in awe, including Ethan. As she reached the altar and stood beside him, Ethan struggled to compose himself. His mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Was this some kind of mistake? Had her family sent the wrong woman? Or had they deliberately misled him about her appearance? Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. Evelyn Harper was nothing like he had imagined. When the officiant began speaking, Ethan forced himself to focus on the words, though his gaze kept drifting back to Evelyn. She smiled softly, her lips curving into a reassuring expression that seemed to say, "It's okay." Her calm demeanor put him somewhat at ease, even as his brain worked overtime trying to process the situation. He couldn't help but wonder why her beauty had been hidden from him until now. Did she feel uncomfortable being admired? Was this part of her family's plan all along? By the time the vows were exchanged and the rings slipped onto their fingers, Ethan's head was spinning. He barely remembered saying, "I do," overwhelmed by the surreal turn of events. As the newlyweds turned to face their guests, applause erupted throughout the hall. People cheered and clapped, clearly impressed by the couple standing before them. But Ethan barely heard any of it. His attention was entirely on Evelyn, whose smile remained warm and genuine. Later, during the reception, Ethan found himself stealing glances at his new wife whenever he thought no one was looking. She moved effortlessly among the guests, thanking them for coming and engaging in polite conversation. There was an authenticity to her interactions that went beyond mere charm. It was as if she genuinely cared about making others feel welcome. Watching her, Ethan realized there was far more to Evelyn than met the eye. Her beauty wasn't just skin deep, it radiated from within, shining brightly in every word she spoke and every gesture she made. Despite his shock and lingering confusion, Ethan couldn't deny the undeniable truth. Evelyn was extraordinary. And as the evening wore on, he found himself wondering not just about her appearance, but about the person behind it. Who was this woman who had captured his attention so completely? What secrets lay beneath her serene exterior? One thing was certain. Their arranged marriage had taken a turn neither of them could have predicted, and Ethan was more curious than ever to uncover the answers. After the whirlwind of the wedding ceremony and reception, Ethan finally found himself alone with Evelyn for the first time. The grand hall had emptied, the guests had departed, and the two of them were left standing in the quiet glow of twinkling fairy lights strung across the ceiling. For a moment, neither spoke. The weight of their new reality hung in the air between them, a shared understanding that they were now bound together, whether by choice or circumstance. Ethan cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Evelyn," he began hesitantly, his voice tinged with both curiosity and uncertainty, "I need to ask you something. I've been wondering about it since I saw you today." Evelyn turned to face him, her expression calm but attentive. "Of course," she said softly, tilting her head slightly as if encouraging him to continue. Taking a deep breath, Ethan plunged ahead. "The photo your family sent me before the wedding. It was so blurry, almost unrecognizable. I assumed." He trailed off, unsure how to phrase his thoughts without sounding rude. Finally, he settled on honesty. "I thought maybe there was a reason they didn't want me to see you clearly. But when you walked down the aisle tonight, I realized I couldn't have been more wrong. You're beautiful. Stunning, actually. So why did they hide your appearance?" Evelyn's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. She didn't seem offended or surprised by his question. Instead, she nodded slowly, as though she'd expected this conversation all along. "It's not that they wanted to hide me," she explained gently. "It's quite the opposite, really. My family has always believed that true worth isn't measured by how someone looks. It's about who they are inside. They were afraid that if men saw my picture first, they might only pursue me because of my appearance. They wanted to make sure anyone interested in marrying me would value my character above all else. Her words struck a chord within Ethan. He felt a pang of guilt as he recalled his own initial assumptions, that Evelyn must be plain or even unattractive based on the pixelated image. He had judged her prematurely, just like countless others might have done if given the chance. Yet here she was, explaining her family's reasoning with such grace and dignity that it made him feel foolish for ever doubting her. "I see," Ethan murmured, running a hand through his hair. "That makes sense. I guess I shouldn't have jumped to conclusions. I'm sorry if I seemed distant earlier. I wasn't prepared for." He gestured vaguely toward her, unable to articulate exactly what he meant. "For being surprised," Evelyn finished for him, her tone light and teasing. Her eyes sparkled with amusement, softening the tension in the room. "Don't worry, Ethan. I understand. Arranged marriages aren't easy for anyone, especially when expectations don't match reality. I hope we can start fresh. Get to know each other without any preconceived notions." Her sincerity disarmed him completely. There was no trace of bitterness or resentment in her voice, only a genuine desire to move forward. It was refreshing, and Ethan found himself nodding in agreement. "You're right," he admitted. "We should start fresh. No assumptions, no judgments, just honesty." As the evening stretched on, the two sat together at one of the ornate tables, sharing stories about their lives. Evelyn spoke fondly of her childhood in the small town where she grew up, the cozy bookstore her parents ran, the summers spent reading under shady trees, and the joy she found in helping others through volunteer work. She described herself as a simple person who valued kindness, hard work, and meaningful connections. Ethan listened intently, captivated not just by her words, but by the passion behind them. In turn, he opened up about his own life, the relentless drive that fueled his success, the loneliness that came with it, and the pressure he felt to live up to his parents' expectations. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to be vulnerable, sharing pieces of himself he rarely revealed to anyone. By the end of their conversation, Ethan felt a shift, not just in his perception of Evelyn, but in his outlook on the marriage itself. What had started as an arrangement born out of duty was beginning to feel like something more. Evelyn wasn't just beautiful on the outside. She possessed a depth and authenticity that resonated with him on a fundamental level. And while he knew there was still much to learn about her, and about himself, he couldn't deny the flicker of hope igniting within him. For the first time since agreeing to the marriage, Ethan felt a sense of possibility. Maybe this union wouldn't be as transactional as he'd feared. Maybe, just maybe, it could become something extraordinary. In the weeks that followed their wedding, Ethan and Evelyn began to settle into a rhythm of sorts. Their days were filled with quiet moments of discovery as they learned more about each other's habits, quirks, and dreams. At first, there was an undeniable awkwardness between them, a lingering sense that they were still strangers trying to navigate uncharted territory. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the walls around Ethan started to crumble. Evelyn had a way of making even the simplest tasks feel meaningful. She woke up early every morning, humming softly as she prepared breakfast. The kitchen became her domain, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and warm pancakes often greeted Ethan when he emerged from his study. He wasn't used to having someone take care of him like this, not because he couldn't afford help, but because he'd always prided himself on self-reliance. Yet Evelyn's gestures weren't about servitude. They were acts of kindness, small ways of showing she cared. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Ethan returned home to find Evelyn curled up on the couch with a book. A soft blanket draped over her shoulders, and a cup of tea rested on the table beside her. She looked up when he entered, her face lighting up with a smile. "How was your day?" she asked, setting the book aside. Ethan hesitated for a moment before answering. Normally, he would brush off such questions with a vague response, "Fine," or "busy." But something about Evelyn's genuine interest made him pause. Instead, he sank onto the couch beside her and began talking. He told her about the challenges he faced at the office, the pressure of meeting deadlines, and the frustration of dealing with difficult clients. To his surprise, she listened intently, nodding and asking thoughtful follow-up questions. "You know," she said after a while, "it sounds like you carry so much weight on your shoulders. Do you ever let yourself rest? Take a break and just breathe." Her words struck a nerve. Ethan realized he rarely allowed himself time to relax. His life revolved around productivity and achievement, leaving little room for anything else. Evelyn's gentle reminder made him wonder if perhaps he'd been missing out on something important, a chance to slow down and appreciate the present moment. As the days turned into weeks, Evelyn continued to introduce Ethan to new perspectives. She invited him to join her for walks in the park, encouraging him to leave his phone behind and simply enjoy nature. They visited art galleries, explored local markets, and attended community events where Evelyn volunteered. Each outing opened Ethan's eyes to a world beyond boardrooms and balance sheets. He discovered joy in things he hadn't experienced since childhood. The sound of birds chirping, the colors of a sunset, the laughter of children playing nearby. But it wasn't just Evelyn's influence that changed Ethan, it was also her unwavering support. When she shared her own aspirations with him, he saw how passionate she was about making a difference. Evelyn dreamed of starting a community center where underprivileged children could access free tutoring, books, and creative workshops. Her vision inspired Ethan, reminding him of the importance of giving back. For years, he had focused solely on building his empire, but now he found himself wanting to use his resources for something greater. "I'd like to help you," Ethan said one evening as they sat together on the porch, watching the stars twinkle above. "With your community center, I think it's an incredible idea." Evelyn's eyes widened in surprise. "Really?" she asked, her voice tinged with excitement. "You mean it?" "Of course," Ethan replied, smiling faintly. "You've shown me what truly matters. It's time I did something meaningful too." Their partnership deepened as they worked together on bringing Evelyn's dream to life. Ethan handled the logistics, securing funding, finding a location, and navigating legal requirements, while Evelyn poured her heart into designing programs and recruiting volunteers. Through their collaboration, they discovered a shared purpose that strengthened their bond even further. For Ethan, this period marked a profound transformation. The cold, distant man who had once viewed marriage as nothing more than a practical arrangement was slowly becoming someone new. Evelyn's warmth and compassion melted the frost around his heart, revealing a side of him he didn't know existed. He laughed more, worried less, and found himself looking forward to spending time with her. And Evelyn. She watched these changes with quiet satisfaction, knowing she had played a part in helping Ethan rediscover himself. Together, they were creating a life neither of them had anticipated, a life built not on duty, but on mutual respect, understanding, and love. As the months passed, it became clear that their arranged marriage was turning into. As the months rolled by, Ethan and Evelyn's relationship blossomed in ways neither of them had expected. What began as a partnership rooted in practicality transformed into something deeper, a connection that went beyond shared responsibilities or mutual respect. It was love, though neither of them dared to say it aloud at first. Instead, they expressed their feelings through small, thoughtful actions that spoke louder than words. Ethan noticed how Evelyn seemed to instinctively know when he needed space and when he needed support. On stressful days, she would leave a handwritten note on his desk. Simple phrases like, "You've got this," or "Take a deep breath," that reminded him he wasn't alone. In return, Ethan started surprising her with little gestures of his own. Once, after overhearing her mention how much she missed visiting bookstores, he arranged for them to spend an entire weekend exploring quaint shops in nearby towns. Watching her eyes light up as she browsed shelves filled with old novels made his heart swell with pride. Their evenings became sacred moments of connection. After dinner, they would sit together in the living room, sharing stories about their day. Evelyn often brought up her progress with the community center, her enthusiasm infectious as she described the children's excitement during art classes or the gratitude of parents who couldn't afford tutoring otherwise. Ethan listened intently, asking questions and offering suggestions, marveling at how effortlessly she inspired those around her. But it wasn't just Evelyn's passion for helping others that drew Ethan closer. It was her ability to see the best in people, including him. She never judged him for his past mistakes or criticized his relentless drive. Instead, she celebrated his strengths while gently nudging him toward growth. One night, as they strolled through the park under a canopy of stars, Evelyn turned to him and said, "Ethan, you have such a big heart. I wish you could see yourself the way I do." Her words caught him off guard, and for a moment, he didn't know how to respond. No one had ever described him that way before. To the outside world, he was the stoic millionaire, the man who lived and breathed success. But Evelyn saw beneath the surface, recognizing the vulnerability and longing he tried so hard to hide. That realization stirred something within him, a warmth that spread through his chest and settled in his soul. For Evelyn, falling in love with Ethan was both unexpected and inevitable. She had entered the marriage with no illusions of romance, yet here she was, discovering layers to him she hadn't anticipated. Beneath his polished exterior lay a man who yearned for connection, who wanted to be understood and accepted for who he truly was. And as she watched him open up, sharing pieces of his childhood, his fears, and his dreams, she fell more deeply in love with him each day. Their bond grew stronger as they continued working on the community center together. When the grand opening finally arrived, Ethan stood beside Evelyn, holding her hand tightly as they cut the ribbon. The crowd erupted into applause, and Evelyn's eyes glistened with tears of joy. "We did it," she whispered, turning to him with a radiant smile. "Yes," Ethan replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But none of this would have been possible without you." That night, as they danced under twinkling fairy lights at the celebration party, Ethan realized he couldn't imagine his life without Evelyn. She had become his anchor, his confidant, and his greatest source of happiness. For the first time, he understood what it meant to truly love someone, not because of what they could offer, but because of who they were. Later, as they drove home, Ethan reached over and took Evelyn's hand in his. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly, his tone serious yet tender. "When we first met, I thought this marriage would be transactional, practical. But now I realize it's so much more than that. You've changed my life, Evelyn, in every way that matters." Evelyn looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. "And you've changed mine too, Ethan," she said softly, "more than you'll ever know." In that moment, there were no doubts left between them. Their arranged marriage had evolved into a love story neither of them had foreseen, a testament to the power of patience, understanding, and authenticity. Together, they had built not just a partnership, but a foundation for a future filled with endless possibilities. Despite the deep bond Ethan and Evelyn shared, their journey wasn't without its challenges. As news of their marriage spread, whispers began to circulate among Ethan's business associates and high society acquaintances. Some admired Evelyn's grace and intelligence, but others were quick to criticize her for not fitting into their glamorous world. "She's so quiet," one colleague remarked during a corporate event. "Is she really suited for someone like Ethan? He needs a partner who can keep up with his lifestyle." Ethan overheard these comments more than once, and each time, they made his blood boil. He wanted to defend Evelyn, to tell them how wrong they were about her. But he hesitated, unsure if stepping in would only draw more attention to the gossip. Instead, he channeled his frustration into proving them wrong. At every opportunity, he introduced Evelyn as his equal, highlighting her work with the community center and her ability to connect with people from all walks of life. Slowly but surely, some of his peers began to see what he saw, a woman whose strength and kindness far outweighed any superficial expectations. For Evelyn, the criticism came from a different angle. Friends and acquaintances in her small hometown questioned her motives for marrying Ethan. Did you marry him for his money? One neighbor asked bluntly during a visit. Others speculated that she must have manipulated him somehow, given the stark contrast between their backgrounds. These accusations stung, not because they were true, but because they dismissed everything she valued: her integrity, her hard work, and her genuine affection for Ethan. Instead of letting the negativity bring her down, Evelyn chose to rise above it. She invited skeptics to visit the community center, showing them firsthand the impact she and Ethan were making together. She spoke openly about her gratitude for Ethan's support, emphasizing that their partnership was built on mutual respect rather than material gain. Over time, even the harshest critics softened their stance, recognizing the sincerity behind her actions. The couple also faced challenges within their own relationship. Like any two people brought together under unusual circumstances, there were moments of misunderstanding and tension. Ethan's demanding schedule sometimes left Evelyn feeling neglected, while Evelyn's idealism occasionally clashed with Ethan's pragmatic approach to problem-solving. During one heated argument about funding priorities for the community center, Ethan snapped, "You can't save everyone, Evelyn. Sometimes you have to think practically." Evelyn froze, hurt by his words. After a long pause, she responded calmly, "Maybe I can't save everyone, Ethan, but I can try." Isn't that worth something? Her quiet resolve struck a chord in him, forcing him to reflect on his own fears and insecurities. Later that evening, after tempers had cooled, Ethan apologized sincerely. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to dismiss what you're doing. It's just, I worry about you taking on too much. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed." Evelyn smiled faintly, touched by his concern. "Thank you for worrying about me," she replied. "But I need you to trust me too. Trust that I know my limits, and that I'll always ask for help when I need it." These moments of conflict, though difficult, ultimately strengthened their bond. Each disagreement became an opportunity for growth, teaching them to communicate openly and appreciate each other's perspectives. They learned to navigate their differences with patience and understanding, knowing that love wasn't about avoiding challenges but facing them together. As the months passed, Ethan and Evelyn emerged stronger than ever. Their ability to weather external criticism and internal struggles proved the depth of their commitment to one another. The judgmental remarks from outsiders faded into the background, replaced by admiration for the couple's unity and shared purpose. Even those who had doubted them initially couldn't deny the authenticity of their connection. One evening, as they sat side by side on the porch watching the sunset, Ethan reached for Evelyn's hand. "We've been through a lot," he said thoughtfully. "People tried to tear us apart, and we even doubted ourselves at times. But look at us now. We're still here, standing stronger than before." Evelyn nodded, her eyes shining with emotion. "That's because we believe in each other," she said, "and in what we're building together." In that moment, they both knew their love was unshakable. The obstacles they had faced hadn't broken them. They had forged them into a team capable of overcoming anything. Together, they had proven that love wasn't just about finding the right person. It was about becoming the right person for each other. And as they looked toward the future, they did so with unwavering confidence, knowing they could face whatever came next, as long as they faced it together. Years passed, and Ethan and Evelyn's lives continued to flourish in ways they could never have predicted. What started as an arranged marriage born out of duty had transformed into a love story that inspired everyone around them. Their journey was proof that love doesn't always follow a straight path. It twists and turns, challenges and surprises. But when nurtured with patience and understanding, it can grow into something extraordinary. The community center Evelyn dreamed of became a cornerstone of their shared legacy. It wasn't just a place for children to learn or create. It became a sanctuary where families found hope and support. Local businesses donated supplies, volunteers poured in from neighboring towns, and the center grew beyond its original vision. Ethan often joked that Evelyn had turned him into a soft-hearted philanthropist, but deep down, He was proud of the impact they were making together. For the first time in his life, success wasn't measured by profit margins. It was measured by smiles, laughter, and second chances. Their personal relationship evolved too. Ethan no longer saw Evelyn as simply his wife. She was his best friend, his confidant, and his greatest cheerleader. He admired her resilience, her ability to see beauty in even the darkest moments, and the way she made every room brighter just by walking into it. In return, Evelyn cherished Ethan's loyalty, his quiet strength, and the effort he put into becoming not only a better husband, but also a better man. They balanced each other perfectly. Her warmth softened his edges, while his determination pushed her to dream bigger. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Ethan planned a special celebration. He rented out the same grand hall where they had exchanged vows, filling it once again with flowers, soft lighting, and the scent of Evelyn's favorite lilies. When Evelyn walked in, dressed in a stunning gown reminiscent of their wedding day, her eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, this is incredible," she whispered, looking around at the familiar yet magical setting. "I wanted to remind you of how far we've come," Ethan said, taking her hands in his. "5 years ago, I stood at that altar thinking I knew what our future would look like. But I was wrong, Evelyn. You showed me that love isn't about perfection. It's about growth, about choosing each other every single day, even when things get hard." Evelyn smiled through her tears, squeezing his hands tightly. "And you taught me that people aren't defined by their pasts," she replied. "You took a chance on me, Ethan, and I'll never forget that. Together, we've built something so much greater than either of us could have imagined." As the evening unfolded, friends, family, and members of the community gathered to celebrate their union. Speeches were given, stories were shared, and laughter echoed through the hall. One guest, a young girl who had benefited from the community center, stood up shyly to thank Evelyn and Ethan for changing her life. Her words brought tears to everyone's eyes, including Ethan's, reminding them of the ripple effect of kindness and love. Later, as the music played softly in the background, Ethan pulled Evelyn onto the dance floor. They swayed gently under the twinkling lights, lost in their own world. "Do you remember the first time we danced?" Ethan asked, a playful glint in his eye. "How could I forget?" Evelyn teased. "You stepped on my toes 3 times. Ethan chuckled, pulling her closer. "Well, I think I've improved since then." "You definitely have," she said, resting her head against his chest. "In more ways than one." That night, as they drove home beneath a starlit sky, Ethan glanced at Evelyn and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. She had changed his life in ways he couldn't have foreseen, filling it with purpose, joy, and unconditional love. And he knew, without a doubt, that she felt the same about him. Years later, when people asked them about the secret to their happiness, Ethan and Evelyn always gave the same answer. "We chose each other, not once, but every day." Their love story wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. It was real, raw, and rooted in trust. Through challenges and triumphs, they had grown together, proving that true love isn't about finding someone flawless. It's about embracing all the pieces that make someone whole. And so, Ethan and Evelyn lived happily ever after, not because life was always easy, but because they faced it side by side, hand in hand, with hearts full of gratitude and love.